Welcome to this conference on the Armenian Genocide Legacy 100 Years On. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Alexis Demirdjian. I am one of the co-hosts of this event, together with the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, as well as the University of Southern California Dornsife Institute of Armenian Studies. Allow me to start by welcoming our distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, and good morning to all of you in the audience today. Particularly a warm welcome to our speakers, some of whom have traveled across continents and oceans to be here with us today. We have a tightly packed program for the next 2 days, and I will be your guide throughout with the help of our moderators. I will present them shortly. For your information, we have a Twitter handle, and I was told to share it with you. It is at 1915legacy, so feel free to follow, tweet, retweet, whatever happens out there. I am humbled to see you in great numbers today. And the reason why I use the word humbled is that we are talking about today events which happened 100 years ago. And there are many other acts of atrocity happening today, which also merit our attention. However, this is precisely the reason why we're meeting today, to discuss how such acts of atrocity can have a long-lasting impact on entire communities, even 100 years later, and how unresolved conflicts will have lasting impact, will freeze relationships between nations, and how crimes of atrocity will generate generations of identity-seeking descendants. As many of you will know, for the past dozen of years, I have been working at the ICTY as a trial lawyer. For those who are not familiar with the acronym, it's the International War Crimes Tribunal for Yugoslavia. And at this junction, I must say that I'm co-hosting this event in my private capacity, so that the views that I express today and tomorrow are mine and do not necessarily reflect those of my employer. Now, this project burgeoned about a few years ago as through my work I started noticing patterns that made me realize that never again was happening all over again. One of the first topics that caught my attention was laws that were adopted in the former Yugoslavia during the war, one of them which was called the abandoned property law. And that right away, that same euphemism which was used during the Armenian Genocide rang loud and clear. And this was the type of laws that were adopted by the Ottoman leadership during the deportation of Armenians, Assyrians, Greeks, and other minorities, dispossessing an entire generation. Now, the comparison does not stop there, but the way with which these laws were adopted are very telling about the central role of rules and regulations and the very need of perpetrators and the rulers to create laws to cover the crime with a veil of legality. This and other examples gave the impetus to kickstart this project, expanding it to other disciplines, and this is what we'll be talking about today. We're not going to be only discussing law. We will look at the Armenian Genocide from the perspective of history, sociology, political science, anthropology, media studies, education, and so on. Now, you may feel that looking at laws and looking at these details might be a little too focusing on minute details, but I like to quote a sentence I recently came across in a book which has just been published a month ago by our keynote speaker, Ronald Sunni. The book is entitled "They Can Live in the Desert, but Nowhere Else," and you can find pamphlets and a copy of the book at the entrance. It is being sold at the American Book Center. The quote goes as follows: "Appreciating complexity while searching through its thickets to find essential factors leads to understanding." And that is part of our exercise today. Understanding is what happens through the lens of comparative studies and by detailed analysis. The goal of the project is to assess and take stock of the lessons that we can learn from the Armenian Genocide, and whether this genocide can be considered as a prototype, as a series of events against which modern-day scholars could compare to identify similarities or dissimilarities. Comparative exercises have taken place in the past, specifically in history studies, and with this project we wish to expand this to an interdisciplinary context. Now, it would be incredibly naive to believe that our efforts today and tomorrow are aimed at fostering reconciliation or forgiveness. These are not the aims of this conference. We attempt in these 2 days to look at the past century with the goggles of academic introspection. Having said that, this conference does suffer from somewhat of an identity crisis because it deals with emotional events of the past while looking at it from an academic perspective in the midst of political gameplay, regrettably. This project does not attempt at convincing any of you in the audience today that what occurred a century ago amounted to genocide. We assume that this is the general understanding in academic circles, and our outlook is focused on the impact of the genocide. Nonetheless, if this endeavor falls short of fostering reconciliation, we hope that it also fosters at least an open exchange. One important aspect of this conference is that since it is taking place in the International City of Peace and Justice, is the individualization of responsibility. Indeed, the many war crime tribunals which have been established in The Hague work towards holding accountable those who are responsible for crimes, rather than ascribing guilt to an entire nation. The denial discourse has unfortunately generated such extreme views among the victim group this time, which at least one author has highlighted as being almost racist. Our current endeavor will avoid such discourse, the clear understanding that those who commit crimes in the name of nations or people that they pretend to represent are nothing but criminals, and they do not necessarily represent the views of the population. We must also point out that although the current project focuses on the case of the Armenians during the First World War, other ethnic groups were also victimized by the Ottoman policies of the time, primarily the Assyrian community and the Greek community and others as well. Therefore, while the scope of our project operates with this limitation, the commemorations around the world these days also take into consideration the plight of other victim groups. Before I wrap up, there are many people we need to thank today without whose contribution we would not be able to be here this morning. First and foremost, we would like to thank the Institute for Global Justice for allowing us to use their premises and hold the conference here today. Particularly, I would like to thank Ms. Marie-Laure Poiré. We appreciate your dedication and your cooperation. I would now like to thank the institutions that are supporting this conference, both financially and from a logistical perspective. First, I would need to thank the University of Southern California Dornsife Institute of Armenian Studies and Ms. Salpi Ghazarian, its director. I am grateful that the Institute has joined our efforts and for playing a key role in the supporting of this conference, both financially and logistically. I would like to thank also the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies, in particular Dr. Nancy Adler, the Director of Research, who placed her trust in this project from the very early stages. NIOD's support was and is essential to this event. I would also like to thank Ms. Martina van den Heuvel for being a reliable and cooperative partner in organizing this event. We also need to thank the National Association of Armenian Studies and Research in Massachusetts and its director, Mark Mamigonian, for supporting this event. We also would like to thank the Armenian Studies program of Fresno State University and its director, Mr. Barlo Demirdjian, who you will have the pleasure to hear tomorrow. I would like to thank the speakers for their unwavering support during the past year and a half. And as we simultaneously attempted to finish the book, which is associated to the conference, and organize the conference today. Without your hard work and your input, we wouldn't have much to talk about today. I need to thank our moderators today, who will introduce shortly, Mr. Matthew Carlson, Richard Antaramian, who I will present shortly. The organizing committee also owes a big thank you to our volunteer fundraiser, Ms. Ruby Shorbadjian, who is with us today. We are immensely thankful for your dedication and hard work in contributing to the making of this event. I'd like to thank our members of our volunteer team, Avo Sevak Garabet, who's here today, Franci Derderian, and Sandra Sahiuni. I cannot thank you enough for your significant assistance with all sorts of administrative tasks, and not the least your moral support. I'd like to thank Mr. Nicholas Kumjian and Ms. Sheila Pailan, who are both currently working at the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, for advising us during the inception of this project. We'd like to thank our AV team, Mr. Frank Swanson and Ms. Kimmy Fulton, and Mr. Philip Digius for volunteering your time and supporting this event. Finally, I need to thank my parents, Krikor and Silvia Demirdjian, for their determined support from the early stages of this project until today. And last but not least, I need to thank my wife, Evelyn Unoya, who not only has put up with me in the past couple of years, but also for always trying to be there with wise advice in every step of this project. Thank you. Now, before I give the floor to Ms. Ghazarian, let me just quickly explain the format. We will have our panelists in the morning and in the afternoon. I would ask you to reserve your questions for the end of each panel so that we give the chance to each panelist to present their presentation. So without further ado, I give the floor to Ms. Salpi Ghazarian, the Director of the Institute of Armenian Studies of the University of Southern California. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you very briefly and explain why Richard Antaramian and I have come this far for a conference. When Ruby Chorbajian and Alexis sent us the plan for the conference and requested support, there were two things that were very obviously important about this. And those of us who have lived with this issue, both as activists, as scholars, as members of the media, for decades now, realize that this city, not simply because of what it is and how it is acknowledged, but because of the people who live here, people who are already at the forefront of trying to understand crimes against humanity, who are trying to understand what it is that makes individuals, societies, governments do what they do that goes so against our self-images as human beings. The ability to talk about an issue, a historic issue, certainly a political issue, in a context before an audience that does not have to be convinced that these things do happen, but that is ready to work with us to think about how, why, the nuances, the non-black and whites, all of the gray areas that make these crimes both easier to understand and harder to comprehend, harder to swallow. And so for that reason, it seemed very important to support this endeavor. And the other reason is the content of the conference. And as your presence here makes evident, as Alexis has already said, if this field of scholarship began 3-4 decades ago by trying to affirm that it is a legitimate field of study, today we're at a point that not only is it a legitimate field of study, but that it has begun to open up to all of the various disciplines that must be involved in the exploration of the questions that have now come to the surface. Not just how and why, but the sociological, the anthropological, the artistic implications of all of the issues involved in committing genocide, being victims of genocide, and surviving genocide, both from the perspective of the victims, the perpetrators, and of course the world community. So for all of those reasons, we're very pleased at the opportunity to participate here, and we wish us all a good 2 days, doesn't say it. A thought-provoking, difficult 2 days. How's that? Thank you.
I now invite Dr. Nancy Adler of the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies.
Thank you, Alex. I'm as Director of Research and Head of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, it's my privilege to be able to extend a warm welcome to the excellencies, our honored speakers, and our esteemed guests this morning. The NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies has a fourfold mandate. We focus on advanced research on the Holocaust, genocide, transitional justice, and we also have a university education program right now at the University of Amsterdam in the history department. Recently, that has included setting up an accredited University of Amsterdam graduate school summer course in Kigali, Rwanda, with the Kigali Genocide Memorial. We are also involved in educational programs, which are teaching the teachers. And as many of you were able to see last night, we are involved in the public debate. We think it is very important to bring our knowledge by inviting experts to discuss such issues as we are talking about today and later this year, Srebrenica, or the 70-year legacy of Nuremberg. So this is a monumental year, and this was a very important moment to begin. If you understand our fourfold mandate, then you can understand when Alex approached us with the content of the volume and the idea of bringing such distinguished speakers here. We couldn't help but want to be a part of this initiative. So it's really our privilege to do so. And I hope that we can learn from the, as you say, fruitful discussion of the next 2 days. And we are certainly looking forward to doing that.